Claire adjusted the hem of her blouse and glanced at the clock. 3:47 p.m. Her daughter would be home from school in exactly 13 minutes, and dinner was already simmering on the stove. The comforting scent of garlic and tomatoes drifted through the kitchen, grounding her. Her husband, Eric, would be back from the office around 6, as usual. Another day, another steady rhythm. Predictable, stable. Good. She wasn't unhappy. At least not in the way people wrote about in books or talked about over coffee. Claire had a beautiful home, a devoted husband, and 2 healthy children. Life was full of tasks, full of purpose. And yet, sometimes, when the house was quiet and she caught her own reflection in the kitchen window, she wondered about the woman she used to be. That woman had once backpacked through Italy on a whim, danced barefoot on rooftops, and chased art and ideas with reckless curiosity. That woman had laughed louder, dreamed bigger, and moved like the world owed her something extraordinary. She hadn't thought of those days in a long time, until Jasmine called. It had been 5 years since Claire last saw Jasmine, her roommate and partner in adventure from college. Jasmine was everything Claire wasn't anymore, untamed, dazzling, impossible to ignore. Her voice still carried that same electric energy when she called Claire out of the blue. "I need you, Claire. No excuses," Jasmine said. "I'm flying to Marbella for a 4-day destination wedding at a ridiculous cliffside villa. It's a circus, models, moguls, people with more money than taste. I'm supposed to bring a +1, and I thought of you." Claire laughed. "Me? Why not one of your famous friends?" "Because you're the only one who remembers who I was before all this. Plus, I miss you, and you could use a break." Claire had opened her mouth to protest, to say something responsible and proper, but Jasmine cut her off with a single sentence. "Don't you want to feel alive again, just for a moment?" The words landed hard. And that's how, a week later, Claire found herself boarding a plane to Spain with a suitcase full of unfamiliar dresses and a heart full of nerves. The villa was like something out of a movie, carved into the cliffs, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, drenched in sunlight and opulence. The guests were as dazzling as Jasmine had promised. Fashion designers, tech billionaires, artists, and influencers, all clinking glasses and throwing their heads back in laughter like the world existed solely for their pleasure. Jasmine, of course, fit in like royalty. Her silver gown shimmered, her smile sharp and contagious. Claire stood beside her at the welcome gala, sipping champagne and trying not to feel like she was wearing someone else's skin. "You look like you belong here," Jasmine said, looping her arm through Claire's. "Don't hide behind modesty. You were always the most magnetic person in any room. You just forgot it." Claire gave a soft laugh, brushing off the compliment, but inside, something stirred. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the sea, Claire wandered from the crowd, needing air. She found herself near the edge of the property, where lanterns lined a cobbled path that led to a sleek, open-air lounge overlooking the water. That's where she met him. He stood at the bar, speaking to a staff member with easy authority. Tall, composed, with eyes the color of polished mahogany. He noticed her lingering and offered a small, polite smile. "You found the quiet corner," he said. "Smart choice." Claire hesitated. "It's beautiful out here. Most people prefer the crowd," he said, "but not you." His voice was steady, warm, not flirtatious, just observant. Claire smiled. "I suppose I've had enough noise for one evening." "I'm Leo," he said, extending a hand. "I own this property, and the ones down the coast." Claire took his hand. Claire, I'm just visiting." "You don't seem like just anything," Leo said, his gaze steady but respectful. The conversation stayed light. They talked about the view, the architecture, how different the pace of life was here compared to the States. But something lingered beneath the surface, a current of mutual awareness. She excused herself before it grew too thick to ignore. Back at the villa, Jasmine grinned when Claire returned. "Did I see you chatting with Leo Santoro?" Claire blinked. "You know him?" "Everyone knows Leo," Jasmine said. "He's the one they all pretend not to be impressed by. But don't worry, he's not the type to chase. If he talks to you, it's because he's interested. Claire waved it off. It was just a conversation. But that night, lying in the enormous bed with the sound of the sea outside her window, Claire found herself thinking about the way Leo had looked at her. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman. The days that followed were a blur of champagne brunches, yacht excursions, and late-night dancing. Jasmine pulled Claire into every circle, introducing her as the one who got away from the chaos, which made everyone lean in closer, as if her grounded nature was exotic. Claire didn't expect to see Leo again, but on the third afternoon, while escaping a boisterous poolside gathering, she found herself in the estate's lower garden, where a discreet cafe overlooked the ocean, and there he was again, seated with a tablet, sipping espresso. "Starting to think you're following me," he said with a smile. "I could say the same." This time their conversation drifted deeper. Leo asked about her life, what she did, what she loved, what she wished for if time and responsibility didn't weigh so much. Claire spoke hesitantly at first, then more freely, surprised at how easily he listened, how he made her feel seen. Leo told her about his properties, resorts and event spaces that blended luxury with sustainability. He mentioned a new initiative he was developing, an immersive art and culture retreat that needed someone with creative vision and logistical talent. As he spoke, an idea began to form. "You know," Claire said slowly, "I used to organize exhibits and public installations before I had kids." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Would you ever consider consulting on something here?" The question hung in the air, bold and unreal. Claire blinked. "I don't know." "Think about it," he said gently. "You have something that people around here don't. A clear sense of what matters. That's rare." She nodded, heart fluttering for reasons she didn't fully understand. Guilt mingled with excitement. Possibility stirred something in her bones. That evening, as the wedding party lit lanterns along the beach and laughter rang across the sand, Claire danced with Jasmine under the stars. The music was loud, the sky wide open, and for the first time in years, Claire didn't feel like she was pretending. She caught sight of Leo at the edge of the crowd. He was speaking to someone, but his eyes found hers for a split second, just long enough to remind her that something had begun, something neither of them had intended. Back in her room, Claire sat on the balcony, staring at the moonlit water. She thought of Eric, of her children, of her home. And yet, her mind kept circling back to the conversation in the garden, to the possibility of something more, something hers. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It was about identity, about waking up. But still, she knew the more she let herself lean into this feeling, the harder it would be to step back. The flight back home was a quiet one, but Claire's mind buzzed louder than ever. She watched the clouds shift beyond the window, her reflection layered faintly across the glass. Something inside her had shifted during those 4 days in Marbella, something she couldn't explain to her husband without feeling disloyal, even though nothing had happened. Not really. Eric greeted her at the airport with a warm embrace and an eager kiss, his hand wrapping around her suitcase handle like he always did. It was comforting, familiar. He asked about the trip, the dresses, the food, and Jasmine's antics. Claire told him everything she thought he wanted to hear: funny stories, breathtaking views, harmless indulgences. She left out Leo. She also left out the moment on the final night, when Leo had found her on the garden steps, watching the sea alone. He had sat beside her without a word, their silence rich with meaning. Nothing was said. Nothing happened. And yet, Claire couldn't forget the way his presence had stirred something still and buried inside her. Back home, the routine wrapped around her quickly like an old coat. School drop-offs, grocery runs, PTA meetings. But now, even the smallest task felt different, like she was moving through a life she loved, but not one she had fully chosen. A week later, Claire opened her inbox and found Leo's name. "Claire, I hope returning home hasn't dulled the light I saw in your eyes that last night in Marbella. I meant what I said. There's something unique about you. If you're still curious, I'd like to explore the idea of working together. No pressure, just a conversation. Warmly, Leo. She stared at the screen for a long time. Her first instinct was to close the laptop and pretend it never came. But the longer she sat with it, the more she realized she wasn't afraid of Leo. She was afraid of the version of herself that came alive around him. That night, she mentioned it to Eric over dinner, carefully avoiding any personal details. Leo owns some properties over there, she said, passing the salad. He's working on a retreat focused on art and cultural experiences. He asked if I'd consider consulting. Eric looked up with a mild surprise. Really, that's unexpected. What did you say? I didn't say anything yet. He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. Well, I guess it makes sense. You were always good at that kind of thing. Do you want to do it? I don't know. Claire hesitated. It would be remote. To start. Maybe just ideas. Maybe more if it works. Eric reached across the table and squeezed her hand. If you want to try it, I'll support you. Just don't burn yourself out. You already do so much. She smiled, touched by his steady support. And yet, something about the way he said it, the assumption that she would keep all the plates spinning, felt like another weight, not a gift. Claire replied to Leo's email the next morning. They began exchanging messages regularly. Strictly professional at first, ideas, concept boards, a few mood pieces. Claire surprised herself with how easily the old skills came back. Planning immersive events, envisioning spaces, aligning sensory experiences with thematic elements. She sent him outlines, he sent her photos of the properties, voice notes describing the land, the history, the feeling he wanted to capture. But beneath the logistics, a quiet rhythm built between them. He asked how her mornings were. She asked about the scent of jasmine near the coastal villa. He sent a recording of the ocean breeze through the olive trees. She found herself waiting for his voice notes, then playing them twice. Still, there were boundaries. Neither of them crossed the line, though both began to feel the gravity of it pulling. One afternoon, while the kids were at school and Eric was out for a work lunch, Claire took a call from Leo on the back porch. He was walking through one of his smaller estates in the hills, describing a crumbling amphitheater he wanted to restore. I imagine an open-air experience, he said. Live poetry, maybe dancers at sunset. I'd want you to design it. Your voice has that lens, that balance between heart and clarity. Claire closed her eyes, letting the sound of his footsteps blend with the birdsong in the background. I haven't designed anything in years. You might be giving me too much credit. No, he said softly. I'm giving you exactly what you've forgotten to give yourself. His words sat heavy on her chest. Over the next 2 weeks, the project took shape rapidly. Leo looped her into meetings with his creative team, insisting she lead the conceptual direction. She spent late nights at her kitchen counter, headphones in, sketching ideas and writing proposals by lamplight. Eric noticed, but didn't press. You seem more awake lately, he said once. It's nice. Claire smiled, hiding the knot in her stomach. Because he was right. She felt alive. She felt like she was reclaiming something. But with that came a guilt she couldn't shake. Guilt that this spark had been lit by a man who wasn't her husband. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was something more elusive, something closer to temptation than betrayal. But temptation wasn't harmless, and Claire knew it. Then an invitation arrived. Claire, we're hosting a private showcase of the retreat concept at the hillside venue. It's a soft pitch for investors, nothing flashy. I'd like you to attend. It would mean a lot. Leo. She read it 3 times. That evening, she sat beside Eric on the couch after dinner, the laptop balanced on her lap. They want me to attend a preview event, she said. It's only a few days. I'd be back before the weekend. He turned to her with tired eyes, the TV screen flickering across his face. You should go. You've worked hard on this. They'd be lucky to have you there. You sure? He nodded, then reached for her hand. Just don't get used to the good wine without me. She smiled, leaned into him, and kissed his cheek. He didn't know that her heart had already left the couch. Claire arrived in Spain on a gray, overcast morning. The hills were quiet, the venue not yet polished for guests. Leo greeted her at the gates himself, dressed in a dark coat and no umbrella. the rain misting across his shoulders. "You came," he said, his voice low with something more than gratitude. "Of course," Claire replied, breath catching as he led her toward the archway. They spent the next 2 days working side by side, reviewing the design elements she'd helped create, walking the trails, sampling menus, adjusting lighting concepts. The connection between them grew without effort, like vines winding upward, searching for sunlight. On the final night, after the last investor had left, Claire stood on the overlook, watching the clouds clear above the sea. Leo joined her, silent for a while. "This project was missing something until you arrived," he said quietly. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed, "but you brought life to it. You brought yourself." Claire looked at him, and for a brief, fragile second, their eyes held a question neither dared to ask. Then she stepped back. "I should go pack," she said. "My flight's in the morning." Leo nodded. "Of course. Safe travels." They didn't touch. They didn't say goodbye like lovers. But as she walked away, Claire felt the weight of what hadn't happened pressing harder than anything that could have. Back home, the house felt smaller, louder, more delicate. Eric kissed her hello. The kids climbed into her lap. The noise returned. The rhythm resumed. But now everything inside Claire was different, and she didn't know how long she could pretend that it wasn't. Claire spent the weeks after returning home walking a delicate emotional tightrope. The house, the dinners, the routines, all remained unchanged. But inside her, a storm was building. The project with Leo moved forward, more polished and promising than ever. Investors were impressed, and new opportunities began to surface, with Leo often pushing her name to the forefront. "You're the reason this retreat has a soul," he wrote in a late-night message. "Don't shrink now. You belong in this space." Claire didn't reply, not immediately. She reread the message over coffee the next morning, her children arguing gently in the background over who got the last slice of toast. Eric walked by, brushing her shoulder with a smile and a peck on the head. It was such a simple gesture, so normal. And yet, it made her chest tighten. What did it mean to belong in a space? She was loved here, needed. But was she seen? The question followed her through every school run, every laundry fold, every meeting she dialed into from her modest home office. Leo began pitching a new idea, an artist residency series, inviting creatives to live and work across his properties for seasons at a time. He wanted Claire to direct the creative side. It would mean more hours, occasional travel, and eventually a larger leadership role. She brought it up over dinner, carefully navigating the conversation like a tight turning road. "I've been asked to stay on for the next phase," she said, passing the roasted vegetables to her daughter. Eric looked up. "That's exciting. What does it involve?" "More responsibility. They'd want me to travel occasionally, maybe a few times a year, nothing crazy. I'd still be here most of the time." There was a pause, just long enough for her to feel the weight of it. "You sure this is what you want?" Eric asked, more curious than resistant. Claire took a breath. "I think so. I feel like I'm building something that matters." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure it out." And he meant it. That was the thing. Eric wasn't the problem. He wasn't unkind or inattentive. He was steady, solid, good. That made the guilt even harder to carry. But Claire couldn't ignore the way she lit up when her mind turned to Spain, to creativity, to the person she was becoming again. Not because of Leo exactly, but because he had given her the space and the belief to remember who she had been before life narrowed into familiar routines. One evening, weeks later, she received a voice note from Leo that made her pause mid-step in the hallway. "I know this is complicated," his voice said, raw and honest. "I know you have a life, a family. I'm not asking for anything that would threaten that, but if you ever feel what I feel, that there's more to your story than what you've lived so far, I hope you don't run from it. You've changed something in me, too." She sat down on the stairs, staring at the floor, her phone still glowing in her hand. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't inappropriate, but it stirred everything that was already brewing in her heart. Claire didn't reply that night. Instead, she lay awake in bed beside Eric, his breathing even and soft, her mind wide awake. She imagined telling him everything, that she had formed a bond with another man, that she had rediscovered a fire she didn't realize had dimmed, not because she was unfaithful, but because she had stopped listening to her own heart years ago. But honesty like that could break something, even if it wasn't wrong. The next day, Jasmine called. "I just saw the retreat's new site. Girl, your name is everywhere. You're killing it." Claire laughed softly. "I'm trying." "You've changed," Jasmine said. "Not in a bad way. You're just fuller. Like the version of you I knew in college finally came back." Claire didn't say anything for a moment. Then, softly, "Do you think it's wrong that I'm feeling all this at this stage in life? When I have everything I thought I wanted?" "No," Jasmine said. "I think it means you're still alive." That weekend, Eric planned a small date night for them at home. Wine, takeout, a board game they hadn't touched in years. They laughed, reminisced, and for a little while, Claire felt grounded again. Safe. Later, as they washed dishes side by side, Eric leaned against the counter. "I know things are changing," he said. "You're growing, doing something big, and I see it. I don't say it enough, but I do." She turned toward him, surprised. "You're not upset?" "No," he said. "I think I've taken you for granted. Maybe we both did. But I want to meet you where you're going, even if it's new territory." His words hit deeper than he realized. That night, Claire lay awake again, but differently. This time, she felt gratitude, not confusion. The next morning, she called Leo. "Thank you," she said, "for believing in me, for seeing something others didn't. But I need to be honest with myself, and with you. I can't walk into this with one foot out. I have a life I still believe in, a marriage I want to fight for. So if we keep building this project together, it has to stay in the light." There was a long pause. Then Leo replied, his voice even and calm. "I understand. I admire you even more for saying that." And just like that, the air between them cleared. Not completely, but enough. In the months that followed, Claire fully stepped into her role with Leo's company. She flew out for events, directed creative initiatives, and began mentoring younger designers. Her world expanded without fracturing. At home, she and Eric reconnected in small, meaningful ways. They started planning weekend getaways, shared more late-night talks. He came to admire her in a new light, seeing her not just as the mother of his children or his wife, but as a woman chasing something she had once put away. Claire didn't forget Leo. There were still moments, quiet glances across a room, emails that lingered too long in draft, but they both honored the line they'd drawn. Respecting it became its own kind of intimacy. And in the end, Claire didn't choose between two men. She chose herself. She chose a life where her creativity had room to breathe, where love could exist alongside ambition, where temptation didn't have to win in order for something beautiful to be rediscovered. Because the greatest affair she had was not with Leo, but with the woman she'd forgotten she could be. And that affair, she vowed, would never end.